I don't think that reframing and reinvention are the same thing.
Good, please.
I think that reinvention is about transformation and about something or someone being new. Reframing is essentially spinning to me. And it can be attractive and compelling, like any good spin should be, influential. But the thing is still the thing.
Good evening and welcome to Stuff and Things. My name is Andrew, and if I were a musical genre, I'd be a pop opera. Yeah, pop opera. Des, what about you? What type of genre would you be?
I'm DeJoiré, y'all, and I would be roots music if I were a genre.
Nice.
Jarvis.
I'm Jarvis, of course, and if I was a musical genre, I would definitely be disco, all the way through.
All right. Roots music and disco. Well, welcome to another episode of Stuff and Things. So, to start off our conversation, I just want to know, how have y'all been since we last talked? It feels like it's been a minute. How are y'all guys doing?
It's been a minute for me. I'm back in Georgia now with my family. Are you in Georgia, Danny?
No, I'm still in South Carolina. But
You're
so close.
I know. I'm about to come see you. So yeah, I'm back in Georgia with my family. It's like a small town right outside of Metro Atlanta. So it's like a pretty, it's suburban-ish. But it's cool. I was in Memphis on the 4th for my little cousin's birthday, which was really beautiful because she, throughout this pandemic, she has been recovering from a domestic violence attack. So that she's fully recovered and was blessed to see her 23rd birthday was a really beautiful celebration for all of us. And like a repurposing of July 4th for us as well. So that was really great. So yeah, I've been good, but it's kind of wild that I'm traveling. I was in New York City now, like I'm in the new epicenter, like in the South, with Georgia, Florida, and Texas. So I'm like, can I get away from this damn virus, y'all? Like
following you.
Like she is on the run. Like she is getting the
weed. Corona money.
It feel like it. But yeah, that's how I've been. So I've been chilling pretty much. Working and like starting some new work, doing some production stuff. So yeah, it's been exciting. So new things on the horizons.
That's good.
Yeah.
I have been mostly okay. The world is a crazy, crazy place.
And it seems like it's not letting up.
It is definitely not letting up at all. I now live in a state that has the 3rd most cases of coronavirus in the entire world. The whole world.
That's wild.
And I think about it and I'm like, there's no safe home place for me to go to. My home places are Georgia and Florida. So
everybody.
I'm like, so all of my states are just okay.
Do they have like a mandated mask thing in South Carolina?
In Greenville, it's a very soft mandate, but yeah, I'm lucky and surprised that we even have it here. Most people are probably ignoring it, as the punitive charge for it is $25, and
really,
that's it. Other places have more strict penalties, like $100, and usually a scaled penalty, 100, 200, 300 jail. But it's $25. And our governor, I think, just announced today that they will be reopening schools next month.
Next month?
Next month.
Oh, I guess. Yeah. Towards the end of the month.
I'm a little concerned about that. There was actually a rally outside my house not too long ago because I'm across the street from an elementary school where parents were demanding that their kids be let back into the schools.
So it was not. I heard of the anti-lockdown ones at one point, but I thought at this point, haven't we moved past that? Give my kids the Rona.
That's what it feels like they're saying. Like,
crazy. And then, in Georgia, the governor has now said that all mandates in every city and county are now illegal and not enforceable. Just very upsetting and stupid. And I've actually been quite angry today at all the hot takes on social media of people saying, y'all could have had Stacey Abrams. No, we voted
right.
in Stacey Abrams. The corrupt governor, who was then the Secretary of State, did not recuse himself.
Right. Who's in charge of counting the votes?
Was overseeing the voting and didn't recuse himself and stole that governorship. So please do not blame the people of Georgia and those of us who voted as if we were somehow simpletons and ignorant people who brought this on ourselves. No.
You know where they're not saying you could have had somebody in Florida? Did y'all read what happened to Andrew Gillum?
Well, there are reasons for that, but no.
He had an entanglement, didn't he?
He what?
He had an entanglement, I believe.
He had a few entanglements at one time, I believe.
That's a good question or a good point. You can have entanglements in relationships. You can have entanglements with drugs. Now, I would
both
entanglement with meth, but you do what you can. You do what you can do.
Right.
Who chooses the entanglements, really? Do you get to choose them, or is it something that you want? Is it part of the yearning to be entangled? And then maybe you don't have an entanglement one day, and then the next day you start preying on your son's young friend, and then you're entangled. I'm not. That's just.
Is that what happened?
Well, Andrew Gillum.
I'm talking about. His was with
originator of entanglement.
Jesus.
I think Andrew Gillum's entanglement was with. I would have prostitute.
Mm-hmm.
There we go. That's fine.
Put the S on that.
Prostitutes.
And meth.
That's less of an entanglement and more of a knot, maybe. But
I hope that he's somewhere thriving in recovery.
Yes, because that's what he's taking time to be with his family and to recover and rehab and all that stuff, which is very important. That if you find yourself in those situations, rehab is a place you can go. It's not really.
No, it's a great resource. But how have you been, Andrew? Update us. Tell us all.
Oh, I've been cool. I've been very busy. I'm grateful that work has not slowed down. That means my job is maybe not at risk right now because of the Rona. It might be at risk because of something I did, but at least it's not the Rona. I guess since we last recorded, unfortunately, I lost my grandfather a couple of weeks ago, Spencer Booker Sr., and that's sort of been, it hasn't exactly been easy losing someone. It felt like earlier in the Rona process, I lost my great uncle, Uncle Thomas, and that was probably back in April, and now my grandpa died. It feels like, and it was not, and the thing is, it was not COVID related. I think that's what the autopsy said. And he was 90, so he lived a very full life. But it was, so my family went up to New York for the funeral, and that was probably one of the first times since this thing had started that we've all been in a room together. Like people have visited each other's yard, but to be in a room together, because like my aunts and uncles probably live within 10 miles of my parents' house. So we're all sort of in close proximity, but to not even be in the same room together or to be in the same room together was something special, but of course, for the occasion, it wasn't exactly great. I think I've already said I moved. We've recorded episodes since I've moved. And I have my own apartment. I used to live with my parents in my parents' house, but now I'm broke because I have rent. But you know what? That's neither here nor there. God provides.
Amen.
God provides. But yeah, I'm good. It mentioned that there's a lot to be looking at that is entertaining.
Mm-hmm.
And there's a little bit of entertainment going on. As you mentioned, one of the things that I just haven't been able to look away from, or that I've been reading a lot on, because not because I'm like personally invested, but because it's just so interesting. The question of celebrity and how that impacts culture is this Will and Jada mess. It really is. It's funny that from their one discussion, we have new verbiage for to explain the complications of life. Entanglements. I think, personally, I think it's their marriage. It's none of our business. They've been married 20 years. They can do exactly what they want. They can separate, come back together, bring a person in if you need it. That's their decision. They're both adults. But it is interesting. And it's also confronting even a little bit. I think because, we all grew up sort of with this idea of Will and Jada love, like commitment, because this young hot couple who are Black and successful. And a lot of us sort of would think, oh, that's what you want, obviously, from a relationship. But when it boils down to it, right, it's their relationship. And I think that's sort of something that if you take it from that large concept and go thematically, it's like, hey, it's sort of like your life, right? You can look at somebody else's achievement and want similarly to what they have, but their achievement is always their achievement. And you need to always bring it back to yourself and your own standards. But have y'all followed that at all?
Yeah. Yeah, I was following it as soon as he came out with saying that. I was like, first of all,
give us a rundown of what happened?
Say it again.
A rundown of what happened?
Well, from what I know, what I paid attention to, he went on, was it social media or an interview, saying that he had an affair with Jada Pinkett Smith.
And this is August Alsina, right?
August Alsina had an affair with Jada Pinkett Smith with the blessing of Will Smith, that they would have this entanglement of sorts. But from what I know, it was supposed to be under wraps. I don't know why he went public with it. Obviously there was no NDA in the whole process. And then Jada and Will respond on social media first, saying that there's a lot of confusion, this didn't happen. And then Jada comes back and says, I'm going to bring myself to the red table, to the table, her talk show. So I'm going to interview myself. And those memes were hilarious. Those memes were incredible. I love that shit. And then they go on, her and Will go on to red table and talk about the what she characterized as an entanglement. And what I found really interesting about what she said really was, she was like, yes, it did happen, but I didn't need anyone's permission. Will didn't give me permission to because they were broken up at the time, as they both said. Will said he was, what, I don't remember the exact wording of what he said. What did he say? That
he said that I was done with you.
Exactly.
Something like that.
Yeah. He was like, I was done with you. And in that space where they were separated for a while, August Alsina and Jada Pinkett Smith had a relationship, an intimate, romantic, sexual relationship, however you want to characterize it. And did they say how long it lasted though? Did she say, is there a timetable?
I'm sure people can put things together by going back and looking at all the paparazzi pictures of them together, but who has time for that? Somebody
to make an
on
impact.
the internet does.
It's not a one night thing. It seems like.
No.
But yeah, that's my take on, like, my take is, I'm like what you said, Drew, it's their marriage, like, and if they wanted to be open, like, they have been, like, there have been rumors of their marriage being open for like for years now, probably like 10 years now, that they were swingers, that they have an open marriage, that they may be bisexual, like, yada yada yada. So I was like, first of all, I'm not surprised, and second of all, I'm like, because it's some crazy shit be going down in Hollywood, like, they be doing some wild stuff. I was like, look, good for y'all. If y'all can work it out, good. If y'all, you know what I mean? They're still married. They still have their family, and it seems like they're good. Well, working on it at least. But yeah.
Dej, do you have any thoughts about entanglements in general, or Will and Jada more specifically?
First of all, I found that video particularly cringy to watch. I know a lot of people have their opinions about what was technically right or wrong, you know, because they were separated and she didn't need anyone's approval. And I agree with all of that. To me, it didn't seem like she was necessarily that remorseful about it because of how it personally and ultimately benefited her and her own growth. But there are obviously two men who were hurt in some way by that action.
Sorry, Deji.
You can't hear?
Yeah, I can hear you, but there's something like interrupting your audio.
Oh no. Yeah. There are two people who were hurt, whether it was their pride or their actual emotions or whatever. She didn't make really any effort to be like, my bad. And the only reason I think that it was something that caused pain or hurt or frustration for Will is because he categorized it as a transgression. And she said, no.
Not from her perspective.
My transgression, I learned from this. This is good for me.
I healed.
And, you know, this happened a while ago. They said they've been in therapy, perhaps a long time ago, at the point of them trying to come back together. She said her apologies then. That's not her business. That's their marriage. But that made me uncomfortable that there didn't seem to be a moment where she acknowledged I caused pain. It was more, I got better because of it, which is a very good thing. I can appreciate that. That made me a little uncomfortable to watch. And also it was uncomfortable to watch Will be upset at whatever was upsetting him, whether he was so hurt about it or because he's upset that everybody's in their business and that it came out, that he has to talk about it at all. I don't know. But it was just hard to watch him be upset. That bad marriage for life thing.
That was cool.
I about passed out.
Somebody in PR got very creative. What you need to do, guys. No, really, trust me. The people will love it. End it with Bad Marriage for Life, connected to Bad Boys 4, which is coming out. It's going to be this is going to work in your favor, Will.
I have no desire to be in a bad marriage at all. Certainly not for life. But I did appreciate that, you know, watching that and being provided a window as much as we have been into this situation, because we really don't know all of the details, timing and all of that, or private conversations. But it did allow me the opportunity to think about what commitment really is and what that means in a lifelong partnership. And I, you know, really took to heart when Jada said, you know, we're building a space of unconditional love where you won't lose your family if you make a mistake.
Mm-hmm.
And that takes some real maturity and some real growth to be at that point.
Because you know what, to that point, like I think that's something what they said, or Will said, I'm gonna love you unconditionally. I think that's easy to say in your first year of marriage. But like after 20 years, 20 some years, what does unconditional mean? I think initially it could mean like, I'm gonna love you stupidly no matter what. But no matter what actually does have consequences. And it's not putting conditions on the love, but it's about respecting that, you know, love does sometimes require conditions. Love does require, like, you can say I love you all, you can say you love me unconditionally all you want, but if you're hitting me, that's not love, because love shouldn't be enacted in a violent, hurtful way, right? So you can say you love somebody unconditionally, but that doesn't mean anything because love does require, I think, maybe actual conditions that you can live up to. Maybe not.
I feel like there has to be, for me, a healthy foundation.
Mm-hmm.
If we're in a healthy place starting out and we both make mistakes, the contract of unconditional love is that we are both, no matter the hurt, no matter the disappointment, committed to working back to our central foundation. And that's a hard thing to do in any kind of relationship, in friendships, in family relationships, and it gets especially difficult if you've been intimate with someone.
You had an entanglement. You know what I think that is indicative of is, something that's happening in culture generally, right? You see it, you see it in our approach to monuments, right? You see that we're reframing our understanding of somebody or of something. Like we used to have a framing, or there was presented a way of understanding what Will and Jada's relationship was. The truth has come out. We need to reframe it. And it doesn't necessarily, it can change the value that some people place in it, or it can, or it can't, or it just changes what the value is that you place in it. Like, I think what I can easily say that, I mean, not that I've ever really put their love on a pedestal personally, but I could say easily it's not like this romantic love, but now the relationship is demonstrative of a hardworking or expansive or a mature or a changing love, which I think is something that's happening in culture in general. Like take, for example, the musical Hamilton, right? Hamilton was a musical that came out about Alexander Hamilton, who was the first Secretary of the Treasury of the United States of America.
Was it about Alexander or was it about Eliza?
And the relationships that he had with his wife, Eliza Hamilton. It's not called Alexander Hamilton, it's called Hamilton, or the impact. But recently, I mean, so y'all are familiar with that, of course, or not of course, but y'all. So there's been a lot of dialogue about how to appreciate that now, which came out in like 2015, 2016, in a 2020 world, where I think we're really discussing, not only discussing how we monumentalize people or how we uphold people. Like people are calling for tearing down of obviously Confederate statues, but even founding or framers such as George Washington or Thomas Jefferson, people who were necessary or played a large role in the founding of the United States, but also were slavers, were people who enslaved other humans and raped the women that they enslaved. And so to see that musical that came out maybe it came out in 2016 and Disney Plus played it on July 3rd. I think it sort of tracks with this idea going back and looking at the monuments that you set up and sort of looking at them again and trying to recontextualize them or re-understand them as the facts come available. Did y'all have an opportunity to see the musical? That was on Disney Plus, or did you see it in person? Did you have any thoughts about that?
that she is saying rather
I was,
reticent.
I was supposed to see it in April at the Fox in Atlanta. Coronavirus.
Snatch that old.
Hold that from me.
Pour one out into my mouth for the mix.
But I did watch it on Disney Plus and enjoyed it. Have you seen it in person, Jarvis?
Yeah, I got to see it in New York last year. Yeah. I got to see it because I had a friend who was working for the production. So they got me like standing room tickets to see it. I'm like, yeah, it's a phenomenal piece of art. And like just the craft that goes into like performing that type of show 8 times a week is extraordinary. And I love that they got it and put it in a cinematic format for like to share it even wider. So I think it's a phenomenal musical. And the part about like that musical and how it recontextualizes the story of the framers, especially the Hamiltons, in Black and brown people's bodies and voices and musicality and rhythm and dance, you know what I mean? Taking everything that we have put into this country for so long and then putting our bodies into the story. It was definitely revolutionary when it came out. And I think now in this space of like where we are in Black Lives Matter and the protests and like tearing down old semblances of oppression and hate and racism, I think it's an interesting argument. I'm not sure how I feel about that when it says like, take all of the, because all of that iconography is still a part of our history. You know what I mean? The pyramids in Egypt were built by, pharaohs, and like they had Israelites and Hebrew slaves. You know what I mean? So it's
I'm
like
glad you called them Israelites because I
know it wasn't even Israel yet. Don't
Israelites instead of Israelis.
You know, I grew up in a Black church. They say Israelites.
They say Israelites, right? They say Israelites or Hebrews.
Hebrew.
The professor circled it and said it's actually Israelis, but
I know that. I'm back home, Andrew. I can say Israelites now. But it's like, how far do we go? And I'm like, I'm not opposed to like tearing the whole thing down. If it's like, if these are symbols or you know what I mean? Even on when we were trying to get Harriet on the $20 bill and like all of the fuss that came up about that, it was like, there are heroes, like Black people have built this country, like period, like point blank period. And like never like in that not being honored, like within the framework of the national conversation or within this nation for almost 500 years, it's like, well, something has to be removed for like something new to grow. So I'm like, yeah, tear them motherfuckers down. Like,
or you recontextualize it. I think it was in Baltimore, or someplace they had a statue of a former Confederate general or something like that, and they repainted it. They wrote Black Lives Matter on it and sort of turned it into its own tribute of taking away the semblance of this person. And we're going to do something new. We're going to take the fact that the Confederacy existed and then not necessarily spit in its face, but we're going to make their own statues question the values that they were upholding. And we're going to make you, Confederate general who fought for slavery, say Black Lives matters. Or we're going to put you in a museum, like one of the in the national. No, I know it too. It's the National Historic. It's the National Museum of African American History and Culture.
Yeah.
The Blacksonian.
Blacksonian. The
Blacksonian, yeah.
That they have a statue of Thomas Jefferson in there, and they have all the people he enslaved written on him. And that's what history makes him there. And I think that, I mean, I'm fine with tearing them down and putting them, burying them, but also similarly to our approach, like with to an approach with Will and Jada is, let's recontextualize it. Let's make it mean something different to us. Let's make it something different because of what it is, or because our understanding of it has changed. I mean, and I think that's constantly, it's reinvention. It's something you see happening all the time. one of my favorite recent reinventions that I've heard about is the podcaster, Michelle Obama.
Really?
I think that's a reinvention.
When is that start? I need to tune in.
Oh.
Well, no, they just announced it like very recently, but she's going to have her own podcast. And I think like, what a fantastic way to sort of throw out the rule books of what a first lady does. Because you see like Hillary's reinvented herself by running for president, but you see a lot of other former very powerful and influential women in this country who served as first lady of the United States. They turned their legacies into legacies that honor their husbands, right? Mm-hmm. Have you heard about that, DeJoiré?
I have heard about it, and I think that we are definitely in a time of no rules.
Right.
So I'm not surprised that, she is expanding the limits of our understanding of who she is and what she can offer to the world, and I think that's a cool thing. But I don't think that reframing and reinvention are the same thing.
Good, please.
I think that reinvention is about transformation and about something or someone being new. Reframing is essentially spinning to me. And it can be
that's good.
Attractive and compelling, like any good spin should be, influential. But the thing is still the thing. And I'm of the belief that you don't mix new wine with old wine, especially if that wine is poisoned. So
well, do you see that happening in our society in any way, where people are claiming, oh, this is a reinvention, it's a reinvention, when it's actually just a reframing? You didn't change. You're the same old thing, but with a new outfit on.
Yeah, lots of it.
Yeah,
I mean, the new police reform stuff is all reframing. It's not anything new. It's not anything impactful or that will cause actual effective change, but it sounds like
I think you see it in the movement right now, where Black trans women and Black trans men and Black trans folks in general, non-binary folks, are finding ways in. Like, they have had to force their way in for centuries, like into the movement, like political movements in this country. But finding their ways to the center of the movement and of the conversations, and really like forcing all of us to push that needle even further. It's like, we can't go back. We can't just revise the sentences of, you know what I mean? Revise the statement to say, but it actually has to have, what's the word? Actionable, effective, like meaningful change and transformation for this thing to happen, and for us to move forward. Because if not, like, people's lives are at stake. And I think that's the thing about the monuments argument that is kind of, is not moot, and is not like ineffective, because symbols and iconography and imagery like is a big part of, like, as all of us as Christians, like, we know what the cross, that means something very personal to you if you're a Christian, or whatever your religion may be. It's like, those things have meaning, but also is like, those things that the people did that were slave owners, like, then, like, yes, tear the statue down, but also, and yes, paint Black Lives Matter murals, and yes, do, you know what I mean, Blackout Tuesday, but also reparations, and also eliminating voter suppression, and you know what I mean, all of these things, and and healthcare for
undo the racist stuff this racist person did.
Mm-hmm. Yes,
perfect sense.
Yeah, I think that's such a really good point for us to be. Thank you for pointing that out, because that's something that's going to be how I approach viewing a lot of stuff, is this question of, are we reframing it or are we reinventing it? Reinvention has to require a metamorphosis, some sort of evolution or devolution, some sort of actual structural change versus putting a new picture, a new thing around it, or shifting it over here just a little bit so it looks a little bit differently. It doesn't look exactly the same, but it's still the same thing. And I mean, and that's sort of something we see throughout all society, especially during this current moment of how, to DeJoiré and your point, Jarvis, that I think we need to reinvent ourselves into a society that understands, appreciates, and acknowledges the political movement of the needs of trans people, but we cannot satisfy with the simple reframing of understanding how police operate. We need to actually abolish the thing at the heart of that. And it's always interesting to see that question come up in art, right? I mean, because it's a little, it's nuanced, it's hard to pinpoint, and it's more of an academic thing. But one of the things that I've been seeing a lot of conversation on is Vanity Fair recently had, on its newest issue, has Viola Davis. Mm-hmm. I mean, literally the queen of acting. Better, like soulful, just not even, and not soulful in the sense of you think, oh, soul music, but soulful in terms of what she does on screen and on stage. It hits your soul. It communicates something through that very unique medium. Mm-hmm. And it was taken by a Black photographer. Her picture for this cover was taken by a Black photographer, but it has her pose with her back, in a backless dress, looking over her shoulder. And the photographer, I forget his name, says that it was based off of that, that traumatic picture of a man who was enslaved and who was beaten, and all across his backs were keloids from being whipped during his enslavement. And the guy was
sorry, small point. You know Will Smith is supposed to play the man in the upcoming movie.
Really?
Mm-hmm.
Look at this. We didn't even plan it. It's happening. Connections. Just allow the journey. It all makes sense.
You in the fight, guys, today, Drew. You in it. You in it, baby.
Yes. I think his name, just to add, I think his name is Gordon. I'm not sure if that's his first or last name, but the man's name in that photo is Gordon. And the guy who took the picture maybe offered an inch-deep analysis of reclaiming something or reclaiming the posture. I'd encourage you to look up what he actually said, but it sort of did not really engage in the fuller conversation of what does this picture mean? What does this picture mean today? What does it mean to have one of the most esteemed Black actresses in the United States in that pose? And it causes me to think about reframing and reinvention in terms of, are we trying to is that a reframing of our understanding of slavery, which is inauthentic, and that we can reclaim it? We can reclaim our authority by positioning ourselves in the places of our ancestors when they went through trauma or were showing their trauma? Or is it a reinvention of our understanding of what it means? Meaning that we can reinvent the past to mean something different. We can take the structure of what it was, deconstruct it, and build something new. And I'm of a mind just for like the question of it, I'm of a mind you can understand it in both ways, but similar to this whole question is, what's the better way, the more meaningful way?
In his case, I actually saw this thread from a Black lady scholar who said that his wanting to celebrate, what the argument was, his wanting to, sorry, my cousin and my little baby cousin are video chatting me. I'll call them later. The lady said that had he dug a little deeper than the inch he did, that he would have found all of this beautiful art of Black women in that same pose that were painted with their backs exposed that were beautiful and actually celebrated, you know, that imagery and their beauty. And instead he connected it to trauma. And for me, it was another important lesson that our history doesn't begin or end with trauma. You know, if we do the work, and probably of all people, we have to do the most work because our history has been deliberately hidden and deliberately lost. We can find these things that are joyful and celebratory and beautiful without having to try and recreate beauty from trauma and pain and violence. And I think that he could have done that too. I understand wanting to do that, you know, the beauty for ashes sentiment. I get it. But I think it re-traumatizes people, understandably. Especially when we haven't been allowed to heal, because the wounds are not only kept open, but they're
salted.
They're not only salted, we get new wounds.
Keep opening more.
Black people in this country.
Have y'all seen that show on Hollywood on Netflix? I'm not sure if y'all talked about it.
I don't
know.
I saw it.
Yeah.
I heard it was
It's the Ryan Murphy show, like where
that's why I haven't watched it, because I don't like him.
Right.
Do not make it. I do not approve.
Andrew ready.
It was tacky. No, I'm joking. It was not all that, but I did not like it.
I have two opinions about it. I'm like, I appreciate it for like its attempt at revisionist history, where like those who have been marginalized are brought to the center. But in like the other regard, it is a little trite and like it is a little tacky. You know what I mean? It's not like the best production of anything I've ever seen in my life. But but I like to me that's an interesting idea. To me, that's an interesting idea of like how, like, if you're going to reimagine history, what does it look like, and who's at the center of it if things could have happened differently, even though they don't, and like what happened in the past have consequences now. I'm like, but you know what I mean? I appreciate that attempt at doing that. I appreciate that attempt at like what could it have been, and how much further would we be now? I'm not sure if it's useful, but it was entertaining to me to a certain regard.
It was entertaining. I agree. It was entertaining. I think it suffers, in my opinion, from similar things that are wrong with a show like Hamilton. It's taking history and trying to, I think maybe that's probably it, reframe it a little bit. Not reinvent it, reframe it. Because it's taking, you know, historical characters and all that, or not necessarily historical characters, but historical events. And no, there were characters, but the thing that, and Jenna Wortham on the podcast Still Processing by the New York Times mentioned what, she said it, and I was like, oh, that's why, but yes, because I pinpointed, she said there's a point in the last episode where somebody says, it was about, Hollywood is about a film being made in the late 40s where it was written by, the film was written by a black gay guy. It was directed by a Filipino and starred a black woman. And it was about all the uphill battle that they would have had to face in Hollywood in the 1940s to actually get this done. And it goes to theaters and people are protesting. And then they saw the movie and everything stopped. They all celebrated. She ends up going to the Oscars and she's nominated. It's like, oh my gosh, this is. And that was the moment I was like, they saw the film and it stopped. As if the only thing to address the issue of race in this country is opportunity, I think is a theory behind it. Oh, just give Black people a chance. It's not just give Black people a chance, it's reinvent our understanding of how you live, how you move, what you do in this country, and understanding that it's something that's intrinsic from our very formation, hashtag 1619 project that that affects race. It's a fun. I mean, if you're looking for something to watch, it's fun in that way. I think for me, a film that does that a long time ago, that sort of would have spoken and done what that film did, was the 1996 ABC Disney movie Cinderella, produced by the very Whitney Houston, starring Brandy and Cinderella, where it casted a Black girl in the central lead as inhabiting this, the personification of a fairy tale of rags to riches, of worthiness, and what happens when you are worthy, when you are a decent person. And it doesn't necessarily do that within the historical framework, but it's doing that work of, we want to revision or we want to reinvent how Black people are understood. And it means by allowing their spaces to inhabit places that they wouldn't otherwise. Again, a fantastic movie. If you haven't seen the Cinderella with Brandy, it has Whitney Houston sing it has Brandy, it has Whoopi Goldberg, it has Jason Alexander. It's like really like a good production, not great production, but a good movie. But but it does what I think Hollywood was trying to do in 1940s, and all the effects from that Hollywood never happened when we did it in the 90s. And it took until like 2001 for the first Black woman to be given an Oscar for Best Actress, right? Halle Berry, and for Monsters Ball, and it's never happened again. The amount of women who have been, the amount of Black women who have been nominated for Best Actress at the Oscars, you could probably count on one hand since that 2000. I think Viola Davis for The Help, and there's probably a bunch in between, but that's the last one that I remember in recent memory is Viola Davis, who in that same Vanity Fair article, I think she said, "I disappointed my people by playing that role."
Oh, I haven't read the interview. Wow.
But yeah, but I think to that end, I agree that we can retake narratives, right? I think it gets troublesome when we try to retake historical narratives or place ourselves in new narratives like that, because that in and of itself denies, I guess, what is the undercurrent illness of this country, or its problem with race. But yeah, I think maybe that's why. I mean, I'd encourage everybody to watch Hollywood. It's a fine, like, if you want to turn off, don't examine it critically.
He and Ryan Murphy are not friends.
Why not? Glee?
AHS, Glee.
The assassination of Amber Riley. Oh, sorry. And I don't want to say R.I.P., but
yeah.
Rest in power, Naya Rivera. Rivera, not Rivera.
DeJoiré, was it like you appreciated and liked AHS at the beginning and it became terrible, or you never liked it at all?
I hated it.
Mm-hmm.
I watched a good chunk, maybe half of them. I don't know how many seasons there are now. I wasn't fond of his handling of Black female characters. Yeah, that was my main issue with him. I think he's problematic.
He very much so is. I watched Disclosure, the new documentary on Netflix about the presence of trans visibility or invisibility in cinema and TV over the past 100 years. And there was this part where I believe it was Laverne Cox. She was saying how she had seen that episode of Nip Tuck where this trans actress was, it was pretty much shamed. The character was shamed for being trans. She was, the character was shamed for being trans and for her genitalia, to put it simply. But she was like, but then when you see Pose, which he executive produced, I'm like, she's like, well, there's that possibility for transformation and people to change.
Mhm.
But I think the thing with Pose is that Janet Mock is pretty much at the helm of it. So it's somebody who knows the community, knows the experience, knows what that scene was like, even if it was like personally or from research. I mean, that makes a world of difference. And those are the type of reinventions that I want to be a part of and want to see, is like people of the experience, Black people, Black women, Black trans folks, like being at the helm of their own experience.
Mhm.
Like, yes, Fox, give me your money because I'm gonna make a bomb ass show. But like, you know, if this is my experience, I need to be the one voicing that and writing that and acting that.
Do you think that the impact of Pose and that it exists and that people from that community are at the helm of it is more important than like the issues of colorism that are apparent in the show?
Mm. Is it that issues of colorism aren't being addressed?
I think it's kind of the same type of tropes where the dark-skinned people are villainized or killed off first or that kind of stuff. And it doesn't look like, I guess, essentially that it is being addressed. Does that take away from the impact of Pose, do you think?
I think it challenges how, like, yes, it does take away from the impact because it could be even more impactful if colorism wasn't as apparent as it is in this show. And now that you say that, I'm thinking back through the last 2 seasons, and I'm like, it's very much so that. Yeah, it does take away from the impact. But yet and still, I know for me, like being a queer Black man, like just seeing these images, like just seeing these stories and like knowing more of, like, even though it's fictionalized, a lot of it, knowing more of like queer history that happened in the US during this time, and seeing Billy Porter now like on the, like his glow up, and I just absolutely love it. You know, I think that will have an incredible impact on young people growing up, whether they're queer or not, whether they're LGBTQIA plus or not. Like, it'll have an incredible impact on like what's deemed valuable.
Yeah, I'm going to pick it up. I generally don't like Ryan Murphy's. I mean, I thought, for example, Glee was, I think, maybe good in it or interesting. No, it's only Amber Riley. But I'm going to pick it up. I didn't watch any of the AHS stuff. I mean, it was just macabre. But I think I'm going to try Pose and see, because that sounds very interesting, that to see that balance of how do you interact with competing notions for visibility, desirability, re-understanding people in different contexts. So I'm gonna give it a look.
Now, Andrew, I'll say this, like, we get the first season, give it a chance now, because when I first watched the first season, I was like, what are these actors? Who are these people on this screen making me mad? I was so mad. I was like, this acting is subpar, darling. But but I was like, yo, Jarvis, give it a chance, give it an honest chance. Because like, then I had to realize, like, a lot of the actors, a lot of these trans women, like a lot of the work that they've been able to do before getting into Pose hasn't given them the best experience or the best training. And trans folks, openly trans folks who are, you know what I mean, who are either in transition, before transition, or after, you know what I mean, like haven't been given the chance to get into NYU's and Yale's and Juilliard's and stuff like that, you know what I mean? So like they don't have like that polished thing that, you know, I look for in acting now. But
an illustrious alum.
Turn it off. This is not good. Who said this was good?
Grad accent.
But I had to just give you that. I had to give you that, but it gets better.
Thank you for the call. Because I mean, I've heard reviews of it, and it's like, oh, okay, all right. But now it's like, I'm gonna thank you for that qualification of allow growth.
Yeah, allow growth, please.
That seems to be a thing tonight. Growth and allowing.
Yes.
Thank y'all guys for joining us for this cultural conversations. Please hit subscribe. I should have said that from the beginning. Subscribe, and have a good evening. Bye.
Bye, y'all.
Bye.